During the attacks of September 11th, all traffic in American airspace was grounded. The only plane in the sky was famously Air Force One. It took 2 days for civilian air flights to resume, with one exception: the desperate flight of a dose of antivenom to save the life of a Florida snake handler. Ever heard about that? It really happened. Everybody knows the big stories of 9/11, but a lot of smaller stories from that day didn't get written so boldly into history. These are just a few of the lesser-known tales of 9/11.
I take it you found the treasure.
It's about 5 stories beneath your shoes.
The World Trade Center was home to a labyrinth of underground vaults that held millions of dollars in treasure. After the towers were brought down, authorities were concerned those vaults may have been a target for looting, even as recovery efforts were taking place on what remained at Ground Zero. One building in the WTC complex that remained standing for World Trade was particularly noteworthy. Containing assets belonging to the Bank of Nova Scotia, the vaults in this building contain nearly 380,000 ounces of gold and 30 million ounces of silver, which the bank reportedly valued at around $200 million. Scorch marks on the security door leading to the vault, once discovered, raised fears that looters had already attempted to steal the contents. By November, operations were underway to extract the gold and silver, while a host of other treasures, including weaponry, armored cars, files belonging to the CIA, and contraband and evidence seized by the ATF, were also identified under the rubble. With the help of armed agents, 30 firefighters were enlisted to extract the vault contents, all of which were safely relocated.
Hi, Boston Center, Team U. We have a problem here. We have a hijacked aircraft headed towards New York.
On 9/11, once it became clear that a coordinated hijacking of commercial aircraft was taking place, all non-military planes were ordered to be grounded. The airspace over the United States was cleared as early as 10 a.m. and remained closed for days afterward. As the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association put it was the day aviation stood still. Reports claim that only a handful of civilian planes were given clearance to take to the skies immediately after 9/11, and one of those was carrying very important cargo indeed. Lawrence Van Sertima was a Florida snake handler who was bitten by a venomous taipan snake. The bite would have been fatal without the administration of antivenom, and with his life in danger, the FAA allowed a plane to take off from San Diego, California with the required medicine. The flight departed on September 12th and was reportedly accompanied by 2 military jets, just in case. The exceptional effort was worth it. The antivenom arrived in time to save Van Sertima's life. With Lower Manhattan in chaos, it was all hands on deck to assure the safety of as many people as possible. That meant evacuation, and every small boat in the vicinity suddenly became an asset in the fight to save lives. That included vessels that weren't even in service, closer to museum exhibits than functional craft. The John J. Harvey is one example of such a vessel. It's a historic ex-FDNY fireboat that was first used by New York City firefighters as early as 1931. Named for a fireboat captain who lost his life battling ship fire, the 130-foot John J. Harvey was for decades the pride of the department, capable of pumping 18,000 gallons of water a minute through its water cannons. But by 2001, the old ship had been retired from service for 7 years. During the attacks, it was pulled back into action by a fast-thinking crew that included the preservationists who had saved it from the scrapyard in 1999. The boat delivered around 150 people to safety, and at the direction of the FDNY, it was used to pump water from the river to nearby fire trucks as well. Once the second plane hit New York, it was clear the United States was under attack. Every commercial jet still in the air could have been another strike waiting to happen. In response to the unprecedented threat, the U.S. Air Force scrambled to launch fighter jets, in case the need arose to bring down suspicious aircraft, civilians on board or not. But not all those jets were equipped with weapons to deal with the hijacked plane. Instead, the jets were the weapons. Former Air Force Lieutenant Heather Penny told ABC News that she and her colleague, pilot Mark Sassville, were ordered into the air despite their jets not being armed with missiles.
We were on a suicide mission.
To take down a passenger plane without weapons, they would have had to ram it with their own jets, one after the other, a maneuver they would not have been able to survive, and it's a fate they were willing to accept. Along with the valuables beneath it, the World Trade Center also contained a great many important artworks, almost all of which were lost when the Twin Towers fell. The structure, of course, held many offices, some of which were occupied by companies attached to the art world, as well as a number of artist studios. Works by Joan Miro, Al Held, Roy Lichtenstein, and Ellen Zimmerman were destroyed, as were the workspaces of artists like Michael Richards, who tragically died in the attack. There were 7 specially commissioned public artworks on the grounds of the World Trade Center that, along with a whole galaxy of cultural artifacts, were also destroyed. Tens of thousands of original historic photographs, valuable craft works, antique rugs worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and more than 1,000 other pieces of art were lost in the attacks, amounting to a combined value of more than $100 million. One piece, the Sphere, a 25-foot bronze sculpture by Fritz Koenig, was later recovered. Though badly damaged, it now stands as part of the Ground Zero Memorial. The bravery and selflessness of the first responders and emergency workers on 9/11 has become the stuff of legend. But from an organizational point of view, the response was catastrophic. In 2004, a draft report from the commission investigating the events of 9/11 confirmed the shocking truth. Though the emergency services put their lives on the line to respond as attacks unfolded, they were hampered by a disturbing lack of coordination between departments. Some flaws were technological, with radios known to not work inside the buildings, and some were operational, with unclear command structures between police, fire, and the New York City Office of Emergency Management. Warnings received by police officers that the North Tower was about to collapse weren't relayed to firefighters at the scene, meaning they were unable to get to safety in time. The bold efforts to save their lives were futile, and the loss of their lives was totally preventable. As early as 1996, government officials identified necessary improvements to New York City's emergency response infrastructure, and in the years preceding 9/11, emergency services did conduct drills and tabletop exercises to try to improve preparedness, but the necessary changes weren't made. On top of that, the Office of Emergency Management, which was supposed to be responsible for emergency response coordination, was located in the World Trade Center, despite obvious concerns that the office would be next to useless in the event that the towers were attacked. Evacuation efforts from Lower Manhattan were made complicated by the shutdown of tunnels and bridges to vehicle traffic. Instead of hailing cabs, hundreds of thousands of people were transported from the danger zone on boats. It was a nautical rescue on a scale greater than the civilian efforts seen during the Battle of Dunkirk, when British troops and their allies escaped across the English Channel, fleeing from Nazi forces and on countless small boats.
All available boats. This is the United States Coast Guard. Anyone want to help with the evacuation of Lower Manhattan? Report to Governor's Island.
Manhattan has been hailed as one of the great natural ports on Earth. With its working waterfront and proximity to New Jersey, Staten Island, Long Island, and the New York mainland, it was suddenly the job of professional and amateur mariners to escort New Yorkers to safety. According to the Coast Guard, some 750,000 people escaped Manhattan by boat that day, and what has since been named the 9/11 boatlift. Prior to 9/11, intel suggested that a terror attack involving commercial planes was possible, even likely. In 2002, outlets reported that an FBI agent in Phoenix, Arizona had received a warning 2 months before the attacks that numerous men of questionable backgrounds had enrolled at American flying schools. The agent suggested in a memo, FBI HQ should discuss this matter with other elements of the U.S. intelligence community and task the community for any information that supports Phoenix's suspicions. Suspicions remained high, but there was only one arrest the month after the memo was received. When the attacks took place, the FBI was in the process of planning security checks on flight schools.
If the U.S. government functioned at the time in the way you would think, and the FBI systems and the CIA systems were integrated, it would have popped up that these were al-Qaeda people.
On top of that warning, there was even more direct information about the 9/11 attackers circulating at the highest level. On August 6, 2001, George W. Bush received a presidential daily brief that outlined how Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda, was determined to strike the United States, echoing warnings that the CIA had voiced to the White House as early as spring that year. Former CIA counterterrorism chiefs have maintained that their warnings went unheeded.
Across Ground Zero, mountains of debris still scar the landscape.
The result of the World Trade Center strikes was 1.8 million tons of wreckage pouring onto the streets of New York. It took a total of 8 months to clear the streets of what was left of the Twin Towers, a task that cost $600 million. The horrific task facing first responders looking for survivors is well documented. Despite thousands helping, only 21 people were rescued alive from the rubble, all within the first day of the attack. After that, responders faced the grim task of identifying human remains among the wreckage. But the carnage left at the site meant that identification of the victims was close to impossible. The incredible heat of the explosions and the force of the falling towers left few remains intact. While 293 bodies were recovered from the rubble, thousands of other victims were recovered in fragments, extracted directly from the rubble or else found at the landfill site on Staten Island where the wreckage was largely taken. Identification of many of those lost in the attacks at first seemed impossible, but in the quarter of a century since 9/11, technology has advanced to such a degree that victims' remains continue to surface. In August 2025, 3 more victims who had lost their lives at the World Trade Center had been formally identified thanks to DNA technology. Paul Keating, whose mother Barbara was one of those victims, told the New York Times, We're talking about people putting in overtime 24 years later for us. That's the amazing part. You know they're not going to stop until they've identified every person. Coverage of the 9/11 attacks went practically uninterrupted on the airwaves for days, with the imagery from the day seared into the world's collective consciousness. But while footage of the planes striking the Twin Towers was replayed time and time again, the attacks against the Pentagon and the downing of Flight 93 were less visible. Flight 93, of course, went down in a remote rural area, meaning no footage exists of the moment of the crash. But in the case of the Pentagon attack, footage did exist. Security cameras captured American Airlines Flight 77's low-altitude collision with the southwest wall of the complex. The impact killed a total of 184 people, including 59 on board and 125 people who were inside the Pentagon at the time. Despite the scale of the atrocity, it took until May 2006 for the footage to be officially released to the media for broadcast, thanks to a Freedom of Information Act request deeming the footage to be in the public interest. Until then, it had only circulated via a leak on the internet, really helping to give rise to conspiracy theories about the nature of the attack.